Morning came, as it always does. He was getting terribly tired. He was a very small, very cold, very wet, and worried mouse. There was still nothing in sight but the empty sea. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, it began to rain. At last the rain stopped, and the noonday sun gave him a bit of cheer and warmth in the vast loneliness. But his strength was giving out. He began to wonder what it would be like to drown. Would it take very long? Would it feel just awful? Would his soul go to heaven? Would there be other mice there? As he was asking himself these dreadful questions, a huge head burst through the surface of the water and loomed up over him. It was a whale. "What sort of fish are you?" the whale asked. "You must be one of a kind." "I'm not a fish," said Amos. "I'm a mouse, which is a mammal, the highest form of life. I live on land." "Holy clam and cuttlefish," said the whale. "I'm a mammal myself, though I live in the sea. Call me Boris," he added. Amos introduced himself and told Boris how he came to be there, in the middle of the ocean. The whale said he would be happy to take Amos to the Ivory Coast of Africa, where he happened to be headed anyway, to attend a meeting of whales from all the 7 seas. But Amos said he'd had enough adventure to last him a while. He wanted only to get back home, and he hoped the whale wouldn't mind going out of his way to take him there. "Not only would I not mind," said Boris, "I would consider it a privilege. What other whale in all the world ever had the chance to get to know such a strange creature as you? Please, climb aboard." And Amos got on Boris's back. "Are you sure you're a mammal?" Amos asked. "You smell more like a fish." Then Boris the whale went swimming along, with Amos the mouse on his back. What a relief to be so safe, so secure again. Amos lay down in the sun, and, being worn to a frazzle, he was soon asleep. Then all of a sudden, he was in the water again, wide awake, spluttering and splashing about. Boris had forgotten for a moment that he had a passenger on his back and had sounded. What is sounding, do you suppose? It means diving deep down into the water. When he realized his mistake, he resurfaced so quickly that Amos was sent somersaulting, tail over whiskers, high into the air. Hitting the water hurt. Crazy with rage, Amos screamed and punched at Boris until he remembered he owed his life to the whale and quietly climbed on his back. From then on, whenever Boris wanted to sound, he warned Amos in advance and got his okay, and whenever he sounded, Amos took a swim. That seems like a good agreement. I'm confused by Amos's reaction there, but actually I guess it seems understandable. Amos is pretty tired and pretty stressed. We all get angry sometimes and lose control of ourselves, but he quickly regained his composure. And luckily, punching Boris probably didn't hurt all that much. It's different if a sprout gets angry and punches another sprout or a teacher. Swimming along, sometimes at great speed, sometimes slowly and leisurely, sometimes resting and exchanging ideas, sometimes stopping to sleep, it took them a week to reach Amos's home shore. During that time, they developed a deep admiration for one another. Boris admired the delicacy, the quivering daintiness, the light touch, the small voice, and the gem-like radiance of the mouse. Amos admired the bulk, the grandeur, the power, the purpose, the rich voice, and the abounding friendliness of the whale. I think that's my favorite page of this whole story. I love the abounding friendliness of the whale. They became the closest possible friends. They told each other about their lives, their ambitions. They shared their deepest secrets with one another. The whale was very curious about life on land and was sorry that he could never experience it. Amos was fascinated by the whale's accounts of what went on deep under the sea. Amos sometimes enjoyed running up and down on the whale's back for exercise. When he was hungry, he ate plankton. The only thing he missed was fresh, unsalty water. I'm hearing raindrops hitting the leaves around me, but I'm almost done with the book, so we'll go ahead and finish. Now, this suggests that maybe Amos was drinking salt water, but I don't think he could really do that. Or he could, but I think that would make him very sick. But I guess maybe for the purpose of the story, that's all he could do. The time came to say goodbye. They were at the shore. "I wish we could be friends forever," said Boris. "We will be friends forever, but we can't be together. You must live on land, and I must live at sea. I'll never forget you, though." "And you can be sure I'll never forget you," said Amos. "I will always be grateful to you for saving my life. And I want you to remember that if you ever need my help, I'd be more than happy to give it." How he could ever possibly help Boris, Amos didn't know, but he knew how willing he was. The whale couldn't take Amos all the way to land. They said their last goodbye, and Amos dived off of Boris's back and swam to the sea. Swam to the sand. From the top of a cliff, he watched Boris spout twice and disappear. Boris laughed to himself. How could that little mouse ever help me? Little as he is all heart. I love him, and I'll miss him terribly. Boris went to the conference off the Ivory Coast of Africa, and then went back to a life of whaling about, while Amos returned to his life of mousing around, and they were both happy. It's starting to rain harder. Many years after the incidents just described, when Amos was no longer a very young mouse, and Boris was no longer a very young whale, there occurred one of the worst storms of the century, Hurricane Yetta. And it just so happened that Boris the whale was flung ashore by a tidal wave and stranded on the very shore where Amos happened to make his home. But that's an amazing coincidence. It also just so happened that when the storm had cleared up and Boris was lying high and dry on the sand, losing his moisture in the hot sun and needing desperately to be back in the water, Amos came down to the beach to see just how much damage Hurricane Yetta had done. Of course, Boris and Amos recognized each other at once. I don't have to tell you how these old friends felt at meeting again in this desperate situation. Amos rushed towards Boris. Boris could only look at Amos. "Amos, help me," said the mountain of a whale to the moat of a mouse. "I think I'll die if I don't get back in the water soon." Amos gazed at Boris in an agony of pity. He realized he had to do something very fast, and he had to think very fast about what it was he had to do. Suddenly he was gone. I'm afraid he won't be able to help me, said Boris to himself. Much as he wants to do something, what can such a little fellow do? I wonder where Amos lives. Those are very distinctive houses along the shore. Maybe Spain? Or California? Just as Amos had once felt, all alone in the middle of the ocean, Boris felt now, lying alone on the shore. He was sure he would die. And just as he was preparing to die, Amos came racing back with 2 of the biggest elephants he could find. I think that's kind of funny. Not just any elephants. Like, he didn't just go get 2 elephants. He chose the biggest ones. Good job, Amos. Without wasting time, these 2 good-hearted elephants got to pushing with all their might at Boris's huge body until he began turning over, breaded with sand, and rolling down toward the sea. Amos, standing on the head of one of the elephants, yelled instructions, but no one heard him. I think that's funny, too. The elephants didn't need to be told what to do. They knew. In a few minutes, Boris was already in the water with waves washing at him. He was feeling the wonderful wetness. You have to be out of the sea to really know how good it is to be in it, he thought. That is, if you're a whale. Soon he was able to wiggle and wriggle into deeper water. He looked back at Amos on the elephant's head. Tears were rolling down the great whale's cheeks. The tiny mouse had tears in his eyes, too. "Goodbye, dear friend," squeaked Amos. "Goodbye, dear friend," rumbled Boris, and he disappeared in the waves. They knew they might never meet again. They knew they would never forget each other. I'd like to know what happened then. And I want to know more about those elephants. I bet they have a story to tell. I also like how it says they knew they might never meet again. But who knows? They didn't think they'd meet this time either. Hi. Are you ready to go? Okay. Amos and Boris.